My name is Elena Carter. I am 34 years old, a firefighter with Engine 13 in New York City. The day the White House called me, I was eating cold noodles in the break room, dressed in my soot-stained uniform, still smelling of smoke from a warehouse blaze the night before. I thought it was a prank, but it was real. A week later, I stood in the East Room of the White House surrounded by generals, senators, and press cameras. Across the room, I saw my father, arms folded expression, unreadable. My mother sat beside him, adjusting her pearl necklace like she was at a charity gala. My brother looked bored, checking his watch. Then the president rose from his seat, walked toward me, and raised his hand in salute. Not a nod, not a handshake. A full military-grade salute. Every head in the room turned, the cameras flashed. My family froze. The president's voice rang out clearly. "Miss Carter, what you did that night in Manhattan saved more lives than most people do in a lifetime. You showed bravery that rewrote the outcome of a terrorist attack. We owe you more than recognition. We owe you safety. Because of you, mothers came home. Fathers came home. Children were spared." I don't remember if I breathed in that moment. I remember my knees felt like they might give out, but I stood there, back straight, medals on my chest, as he placed a commendation around my neck. I heard someone gasp when he said the word hero. Funny. No one used that word when I first joined the fire department. Not my mother, not my father, not my big brother, the rising star at the CIA. Back then, they called me reckless, a disappointment, a waste of potential. They laughed at my uniform. They mocked my paycheck. They asked me over and over when I would stop playing with hoses and go back to school like a serious person. They told their friends I was doing something blue-collar for now until she finds herself. But I did find myself. Not in lecture halls or in policy briefings, but in burning stairwells and smoke-filled basements. I found myself carrying strangers out of buildings, giving CPR in alleys, hugging widows in uniforms covered in ash. They never asked what it felt like to lose someone you tried to save. They never asked how I slept after pulling a child's body from a fire. But they showed up that day at the White House, sat in the audience like proud spectators, as if they had written my story instead of watching it from afar in silent judgment. So let me tell you what happened. Let me take you back to the beginning, before the ceremony, before the cameras, before the president saluted me, before the world knew who I was. Let me tell you what they never asked about. Let me tell you how I became the disgrace who saved Manhattan. I grew up in a townhouse lined with ivy and expectations. The Carters lived 3 blocks from Harvard Square on a street where last names carried more weight than job titles. My father, Robert Carter, was a 2-term state senator, the kind who never missed a photo op or a fundraiser. My mother, Lillian Carter, taught public policy at Yale and chaired committees that shaped education reform. My older brother, Nathan, graduated summa cum laude from Princeton and now works for the CIA, analyzing threats before they make headlines. In our house, the only currency that mattered was prestige, achievement as defined by degrees, accolades, and connections. We were not a warm family. We were efficient, polished, impressive in holiday newsletters and donor galas. I was the youngest, the least focused, the one who colored outside the lines, both literally and metaphorically. I never fit the mold. I didn't want to. My earliest memory of rebellion wasn't loud or dramatic. It was in the 6th grade when I chose a book on female explorers instead of writing my assigned essay on constitutional law. My father marked the grade sheet with a red pen, muttering something about wasted potential. My mother pursed her lips, but said nothing. Nathan, perfect as always, just laughed. I learned early that being different in my family meant being disappointing. High school was worse. I wasn't failing, but I wasn't exceptional either. Not in the ways that counted to them. I was captain of the girls' lacrosse team, had solid grades, and spent my weekends volunteering at the local animal shelter. My father called it cute, but reminded me that extracurriculars wouldn't matter unless they involved political internships. By junior year, I knew I didn't want what they wanted for me. I didn't care about public office or Ivy League legacies. I wanted to do something real, something that mattered the moment it happened, not 20 years later in a report. The first time I saw a fire truck up close was when an apartment building 2 blocks from my school caught fire. I watched the firefighters so calm, so fast, carrying children down smoke-filled stairwells, barking orders, taking control. It wasn't glamorous. It was grit and sweat and urgency, and it felt like purpose. I was 16 and I knew. That night, I looked up how to become a firefighter. I didn't tell anyone. The next 2 years, I did what they expected, took the SAT, applied to the usual schools. I even got into Brown, though, barely. But when the acceptance letter came, I didn't feel proud. I felt sick. That summer, I walked into my father's office, diploma in hand, and told him I wasn't going. He looked up from his desk like I had just told him I'd joined a cult. "You're throwing away your future," he said, voice clipped. "To do what? Chase fires, to fight them," I said. "To save people." He laughed. My mother cried. Nathan told me to enjoy playing firefighter while it lasts. They cut me off financially. I packed 2 duffel bags and moved into a basement apartment in Queens. Enrolled in the fire academy with my savings from waitressing and tutoring. The first day at the academy, I was the only woman in a class of 23. The men smirked when I walked in. I was 5'6", not bulky, not loud. I kept to myself. I passed every physical test. I outscored most of them in the classroom. I learned how to swing an axe, how to haul a 200-pound dummy up 5 flights of stairs, how to control panic when smoke blinds you. No one cheered. No one congratulated me. But I knew. I was doing something that mattered. After graduation, I was assigned to Engine 13, a busy unit in Manhattan that responded to everything from kitchen fires to mass casualty events. My first week, we pulled a boy out of a burning brownstone. He died in the ambulance. I didn't sleep for 3 nights. I kept thinking about his shoes. One was missing. No one in my family called. They didn't ask how the job was going. At Thanksgiving, my father toasted Nathan's new CIA post. My mother talked about a paper she published. No one mentioned I had saved 2 people from a collapsed parking garage 2 days earlier. When I brought it up, my brother rolled his eyes. "Rescue Barbie saves the day," he said. My mother smiled like it was a compliment. I stopped trying after that. They didn't want to hear about smoke or ash or blood or screams. They wanted law schools and fellowships. I wanted to breathe, to matter, and I did, even if they couldn't see it. I built a second family at Engine 13. People who called at 2 a.m. just to check in. People who sat in silence with me after rough shifts. People who knew the sound of a building giving way before it did. I was proud of what I did. I was proud of who I was. Even if my family called me a disgrace. It was a Thursday night in late May, the kind of humid Manhattan evening that sticks to your skin. I was on the night shift at Engine 13. We were cleaning gear killing time, waiting for the inevitable call. At 11:42 p.m., it came. A 5-alarm fire at the Orion Grand, one of the most luxurious hotels in Midtown. Reports of multiple floors engulfed possible gas leak, and worst of all, possible entrapments. We rolled out within 90 seconds. Sirens screamed through the streets. I was in the back seat checking oxygen tanks and recalling the building's blueprint in my mind. The Orion had underground levels. That mattered. The moment we arrived, chaos unfolded. Glass shattered from upper windows. Smoke billowed into the night sky. Guests ran barefoot into the street, clutching phones and suitcases. Flames licked the upper balconies. We were told to clear the east wing and assist with floor-by-floor evacuation. My lieutenant pointed me and Cruz, another senior firefighter, toward the basement level to check for maintenance staff. The air down there was thick, already laced with smoke. As we descended the stairwell, something felt off. The fire hadn't reached this part of the building yet, but it was too quiet. No alarms. No movement. Then we heard it. Faint banging. Metal on metal. Cruz moved toward the sound while I swept the hall with my flashlight. That's when I saw them. A man and a young woman zip-tied to chairs inside what looked like a storage room. I broke the lock with my Halligan bar, and Cruz radioed for assistance. The girl's face was bruised. The man, older, barely conscious. His ID badge had fallen on the ground. I picked it up. Senator David Langford. I blinked, couldn't believe it. Senator Langford had disappeared 2 days earlier during a conference in D.C. News said he left early for personal reasons. Apparently not. Cruz and I began cutting the restraints. The girl whispered that they had been brought here against their will. She didn't know who the men were, only that they had accents and were angry about something political. Then I noticed the blinking light under the desk. A small box with wires carefully placed and armed. A motion-triggered explosive, and we were inside the blast zone. Cruz froze. He radioed for the bomb squad, but they were 10 minutes out. We didn't have 10 minutes. Smoke was creeping under the door. I told him to get Langford and the girl out fast. I stayed. I don't remember being afraid. I remember the math, the wires, the pressure plate, the countdown timer blinking but not yet activated. I used a breathing mask to muffle the sound of my panic. I stabilized the device with a fire axe handle, then slowly disconnected the primary trigger. One wire at a time. Blue, yellow, red. I had only learned the basics in hazmat response training, no real practice, but I had watched enough to know what not to touch. At 6 minutes, the motion sensor light turned orange. I held my breath. I didn't move. I closed my eyes and thought about the kid whose shoe I never found. Then I clipped the final wire. The light went off. The box went still. I stumbled back, lungs burning from smoke, and radioed that the area was safe. Cruz met me halfway back up the stairs. His face was streaked with soot. I collapsed onto the pavement outside just as the bomb squad pulled in. I didn't talk to the press. I didn't even go to the ER. I just showered at the station and logged the call. That night, I didn't sleep. The next day, the news ran headlines about the fire, but mentioned nothing about the senator or the bomb. Everything was locked down. Classified, someone said. All we got was a generic thank you memo from City Hall. No names. No credit. My family. They didn't call. I sent a text to my mother saying I'd responded to the Orion Grand Fire. She replied, "Saw it on the news. Looked intense. Be safe." That was all. No one asked if I was okay. No one knew I had dismantled a bomb with my bare hands. No one knew I had just saved a United States senator and his daughter. And for a while, I thought that maybe no one ever would. 3 days after the Orion Grand Fire, everything went back to normal. Or at least it pretended to. The city moved on. The headlines shifted. The department filed our reports, and the incident was sealed under federal review. Cruz and I were told not to discuss what we'd seen in the basement. The senator's team issued a blanket statement thanking first responders, but made no mention of a kidnapping or explosives. The official story was a fire due to an electrical short. Nothing more. I returned to my usual shifts back on the truck, washing gear, checking pressure valves, chasing alarms in laundromats and tenements. It was as if nothing had happened, except that everything had. I carried the image of that blinking light in my sleep. Woke up at 3 a.m., drenched in sweat, my fingers twitching like they were still holding wire cutters. I checked the news each morning, expecting some new release, some declassification. But silence. No recognition, no medal, no mention, just silence. I went to visit my parents the following weekend. Nathan was home too. We sat in the garden sipping wine, the air filled with the smell of my mother's lavender bushes. My father talked about a new education bill he was co-sponsoring. My mother beamed as he spoke. Nathan mentioned something about cybersecurity threats he was monitoring overseas. They all looked at me when I said nothing. So I told them. I said I'd been at the Orion fire. I said I had gone into the basement, that I had helped rescue Senator Langford and his daughter, that there had been a bomb, that I had stayed behind to defuse it because no one else could. I kept my voice calm, my words measured. I thought maybe they would see me differently. Finally! My mother blinked. My father furrowed his brow. Nathan smirked. A bomb, he said, in Midtown Manhattan. That's not what the news said. It wasn't public, I said. It's classified. But it happened. Sure it did, he said, reaching for his drink. You probably just helped someone down the stairs and imagined the rest. My father cleared his throat. We all process stress differently. These fires can get into your head. My mother smiled politely. We're just glad you're safe, darling, but don't get carried away. You've always had such a vivid imagination. I stared at them. 3 people I had bled to impress who had ignored every promotion, every rescue, every overnight shift. And now, when I had done something undeniably real, they looked at me like I was a child playing make-believe. I excused myself from dinner. I went upstairs and sat in my childhood room, the same walls lined with debate trophies and framed family portraits. My own accomplishments were nowhere. There was no space for them. No space for me. I wrote in my journal that night. I wrote what happened in the basement. Every wire, every breath, every decision. I wrote it so that if I ever started to doubt myself, I'd have something to hold on to, because clearly no one else would believe me. That week, I almost quit. I sat in my locker room, helmet in hand, and wondered what the point was. But then Torres, one of our lieutenants, slapped me on the back and said Langford's people asked for your badge number, said they'd pass it up the chain. I nodded, said nothing. I wanted it to mean something, but I didn't dare hope. Not yet. 2 months passed. Summer swept into the city, thick and relentless. The Orion Grand reopened with no mention of the fire beyond a small plaque in the lobby thanking first responders. My routine settled into something close to numbness. I stopped checking the news. I stopped telling my story. Even Cruz, who had been there with me, had moved on back to joking in the break room and flirting with nurses on supply runs. Then one morning, just past sunrise, I got a call from an unknown Washington number. I let it go to voicemail. Then came another, and another. I finally answered on the third ring, annoyed and groggy. The voice on the other end was crisp, formal. "Miss Carter, this is Lieutenant Commander Rachel Hayes, Office of the President. We'd like you to report to Walter Reed Medical Center next week for a private briefing. You've been recommended for commendation based on actions related to the Orion Grand incident." At first, I thought it was a scam, but she gave me a case number and a secure callback line. I hung up my hands, shaking. The next day, a package arrived. Inside was an encrypted tablet and a government-issued suit pass. The instructions were clear. Travel was arranged, hotel covered. The meeting was off-record high clearance. When I arrived at Walter Reed, I was met by a man in uniform and 2 civilians from the Department of Homeland Security. They walked me into a soundproof conference room. One of them handed me a printed report stamped with red letters, "Confidential, eyes only." The document detailed the attempted kidnapping of Senator David Langford and the successful disarmament of a classified explosive device by an unnamed civilian first responder. My name was written in bold beside the words, "Heroic Civilian Action Under Duress." The woman across from me closed the folder. Miss Carter, the intelligence gathered during that fire, confirmed the presence of a sleeper cell operating on U.S. soil. Your decision to remain behind, neutralize the device, and protect federal officials changed the course of a national security threat. I blinked. I didn't speak. She continued. Due to the sensitivity of this incident, public recognition has been delayed until we could secure all channels. However, the President has personally requested to present your commendation. The White House will hold a private ceremony next week. Please confirm your availability. I nodded slowly. They handed me a second folder. This one held a single invitation embossed with the presidential seal. I stared at it for a long time. I walked out of that room into sunlight that felt too bright. I called my captain. He didn't know. I called Cruz. He didn't know either. This was bigger than the department, bigger than anything I could have imagined. That night, I sat in my hotel room staring at the invitation. I picked up my phone and drafted a message to my parents. "I'm receiving a national commendation from the President next week at the White House. You're invited if you want to attend." I sent the same to Nathan. None of them replied for hours. When they did, my father's message read, "We'll try to rearrange our schedules. It's a busy week." I laughed out loud. Alone, in silence. The day of the ceremony arrived under a cloudless sky. Washington felt ceremonial even before I stepped onto the White House lawn. My uniform was pressed, my boots polished until they reflected light. I wore my department badge on my left breast and the small pin the Langford team had mailed me a week earlier with a handwritten note. "You didn't just save us, you changed the ending." Inside the East Room, everything gleamed golden curtains, crisp white chairs, the air thick with perfume and protocol. Cameras lined the back wall. Uniformed officials moved with precision. As I waited in the antechamber, I glanced through the side door and saw them, my family. My father in a tailored navy suit, jaw tense. My mother beside him, hands folded neatly in her lap, wearing a pale pink blazer like she was attending a brunch. Nathan stood just behind them, glancing at his phone, then up at the ceiling, then back down. None of them saw me. A staffer tapped my arm. It was time. I stepped forward as the announcer's voice echoed through the room. Today, we honor Elena Carter of the New York City Fire Department for exceptional bravery and selfless service during a national emergency. I walked to the front, heartbeat, steady footsteps slow. The citation continued listing the incident in formal language. Miss Carter acted alone in defusing an explosive device while rescuing 2 U.S. citizens, including a sitting senator. Her actions prevented mass casualties and uncovered intelligence that led to the disruption of a planned terrorist operation on domestic soil. As the final words were read, the president stood. He did not simply reach for the medal. He turned to me, placed his hand at his brow, and delivered a salute. The room fell silent. Flashbulbs blinked. A second later, a wave of whispered gasps rippled through the audience. Then applause. Loud. Sustained. My family did not clap right away. I saw my father lower his head slightly. My mother blinked too fast. Nathan stood stiffly unmoving. The president placed the commendation around my neck and leaned in. Thank you for acting when others would have waited. This country is safer because of you. He stepped back and shook my hand. That was the moment I knew I didn't need their approval. I had crossed into a different reality. One they could never understand, yet one they were being forced to witness. The reception that followed was a blur of handshakes, photographs, and introductions. I met the Secretary of Homeland Security, who said the intel gathered had led to 5 arrests. I spoke briefly with Senator Langford and his daughter. She hugged me unashamed of tears. My daughter started sleeping again because of you, she whispered. I turned to find my family hovering near the edge of the crowd. For once, they looked like the ones out of place. My father approached first. He didn't speak right away, just looked at the medal, then at my face. I had no idea, he said quietly. No, you didn't, I replied. My mother touched my sleeve, eyes glossy. I was so scared, Elena. Why didn't you tell us I tried? You didn't listen. Nathan spoke last. He looked at me, his usual smirk gone. I said some really stupid things to you. I didn't get it. Now I think maybe I never will. I didn't offer comfort. I didn't rush to forgive. I let the silence speak. Then I nodded. That's probably true. They drifted away, eventually back into the crowd, back into their world of appearances and accolades. I stayed near the people who knew what real service meant, who smelled like smoke and wore scars like honor. That night back in my hotel room, I placed the medal beside my badge. I didn't cry. I didn't text anyone. I just breathed. Fully, for the first time in years. The morning after the ceremony, I met my family for breakfast at the hotel cafe. It wasn't my idea. My mother had sent a late text asking if we could all sit down together like old times. I knew it wouldn't be like old times. Old times meant politeness, not connection. But I went. We sat at a corner table. My father ordered coffee and eggs. My mother asked for green tea. Nathan didn't order anything. I wasn't hungry. My medal was tucked in my bag beside me. It felt heavier than metal, heavier than gold. The silence stretched until my father finally cleared his throat. That was quite a ceremony. The way they spoke about you, I've never seen anything like it. I looked at him waiting. My mother leaned forward. Elena, I owe you an apology. We both do. We never understood what your job meant. We didn't see it until yesterday. I wanted to believe her, but belief needs evidence. I said nothing. Nathan broke in. When they showed the footage, the body cam from the basement, the way you stayed calm, the way you moved. I'm sorry for every time I made fun of you, for calling you a disgrace, for not asking what your days were really like. You shouldn't have needed a ceremony to be taken seriously, I said quietly. I shouldn't have had to risk my life for you to listen. My father looked pained. Your mother and I, we had this idea of what success looked like. We thought we were protecting you from hardship. I shook my head. You weren't protecting me. You were protecting your image of me. There's a difference. My mother nodded slowly, tears welling. You were always brave. We just didn't recognize the form it took. You didn't want me to be brave. You wanted me to be obedient. There's a difference there, too. I didn't say it to wound them. I said it because I needed them to hear it plainly. Not dressed up, not buried in passive-aggressive remarks or polite denial. My father finally spoke again, softer now. Is there a way back, Elena? I don't know. Maybe. But not today. Today, I need space, time, and honesty. They nodded. No arguments, no protests. That was new. We stood to leave. My mother hugged me. My father hesitated, then did the same. Nathan gave me a long look. "You're the strongest person in this family," he said. I didn't reply. That evening, I flew back to New York. The city skyline welcomed me like it always had, bright, unapologetic, and real. My shift started the next morning. I arrived early, changed into my gear, and slipped the medal into my locker. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. A reminder that sometimes recognition comes late. Sometimes it comes with cameras and salutes, but sometimes it comes quietly. In the way your crew looks at you, in the weight you carry, in the way you stand anyway. That was the recognition that mattered most, the one I'd earned long before anyone clapped. 3 weeks after the ceremony, I was invited to speak at the Fire Academy where I had trained 13 years earlier. The classroom smelled like sweat and rubber and resolve. I stood in front of a group of recruits, most of them barely 20, their eyes filled with nerves and ambition. I didn't read from notes. I didn't show slides. I told them the truth. I told them about failure, about being ignored, about being laughed at. I told them about the child whose shoe I never found. I told them that bravery doesn't always feel like a movie. Sometimes it feels like doubt and shaking hands and doing it anyway. I told them that they might never be thanked, that the people who love them may never understand why they chose this, that there will be days they want to quit, that on those days they'll need to remember their why. After the session, a young woman approached me. She was small, serious-eyed, wearing a helmet too big for her. She said, "I want to be like you." I looked at her and said, "Don't be like me. Be better. Be braver sooner." A week later, I found a package at the station. Inside was a framed photo. It was me at the ceremony standing at attention, the president mid-salute. A sticky note was attached. They saw it now, but I always did. No signature, just that. I knew it was Torres. She had been the one constant in the chaos, the one who never needed to be convinced. I hung the photo in the station hallway, not in my apartment. Not as decoration. As a reminder. Months passed. The news cycle shifted. Other heroes came. Other stories rose. And that was right. The world moves on. But I remained. Doing the work. Taking the calls. Holding hands in ambulances. Pushing through smoke and rubble. My family started calling more. My mother sent articles about women in public service. My father invited me to speak at a town hall. I declined. Not because I was bitter, but because I had nothing left to prove. Nathan asked if he could visit the station. I said yes. He came. He watched. He cried when we reviewed call footage. Not out of pity, out of understanding. That was enough. We never went back to who we were. But we found something new, something closer to respect. One evening, I sat alone in the bunk room, the lights low, the city humming outside the window. I thought about legacy, about worth, about how easy it is to believe the voices that say you're not enough, how easy it is to internalize silence as judgment. But here's what I've learned. You don't need the world to applaud. You don't need your family to validate your path. What you need is your own truth, your own reason to keep going, your own pride when the room is empty and the smoke is thick and no one is watching, because the real recognition isn't the medal or the speech or the salute. It's the life you build in defiance of those who didn't believe in you. It's the fires you walk into anyway. It's the people you pull out. It's the parts of yourself you save in the process. So, if you're listening to this and you've ever been called a disappointment, if you've ever been told your path isn't respectable, if your uniform was mocked or your medals ignored, remember this. Sometimes the people who doubt you the most are just waiting for the world to tell them they were wrong. And sometimes the world does, in the form of a salute, in front of a room full of cameras, in the eyes of a president. But even if it doesn't, you still matter. You always did. The world just needed time to catch up.